What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Terror Table, your favorite horror movie podcast, maybe, from the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. I'm one of your hosts here every single week. My name is Mitch, and back at the table this week, I got who?
You got Kyle.
Wow. And Boozy. Incredible.
Oh,
What a lineup. What a solid lineup.
Honestly,
guys.
pretty good lineup. I've definitely seen worse lineups.
Yeah, like if we advertise this,
lineup.
it'd be great.
The starting lineup.
Yeah, we are the starting lineup.
Tell me what you thought about. Yeah.
You work. Okay. Okay, yeah, so I guess we'll just get her going here. We're opening up a new series this week, a new 3-part series in which we are discussing exorcism movies. So may the power of Kyle compel you. That was bad.
That was a pretty good one.
Yeah, but Kyle's next week. His pick's next week. This week we're talking about Boozy's pick, which is
The Exorcism of Emily Rose from, what was it, 2007?
I think it was 2004. Yeah.
Five, you're right. 2005. My man Kyle got me.
I saw it in grade 9. I'll get to that. Saw it with back in the day when you'd go with like a row full of people. You know? Yeah, I don't know if you guys ever. I don't know if you guys ever had that many friends. Hey, I did the same thing with John Tucker Must Die.
That was the first one for me.
I mean, it was a date, but there was like 15 other people there. So
right, you assembled your date posse.
Yeah,
your date entourage.
Norbit, it's those kind of movies.
But for the people like Bryson out there and our other listeners who like keeping up with what we're watching each week, the good thing about these series is that we tell you exactly what we're watching for the next 3 weeks, so you have time to check them out for yourselves. We started with the oldest title here which is kind of weird that I'm actually kind of okay with that, doing like newer exorcism movies, but our oldest one that we'll be discussing is The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Next week is going to be Kyle's pick, which is what, Kyle?
We're going to be doing The Last Exorcism.
Yes, the Eli Roth Presents vehicle. And then we'll be closing things up with my pick, which is a film from 2020 that I didn't see until recently. And I am not going to talk about it on this episode, obviously, because I'm choosing it for my pick, which is Anything for Jackson, which has been described as a reverse exorcism film. It's on Shudder in the US. You have to rent it if you're in Canada. I know Boozy and Kyle are a couple pirates, though, so I'm sure you'll find a way.
Whoa, kind of a bold claim. A bold claim.
I gave up my years of pirating long ago.
Yeah, you gave those years up when I gave you my access code for all of my streaming services.
There you go.
I'm going no comment on this one.
Yeah, but either way, I'm really looking forward to talking about Anything for Jackson, because that's a brand new exorcism-ish movie that we could be talking about. And we've already done an episode on The Exorcist. I think we deleted that episode by now. So we might visit it down the road, but what's really left to be said about The Exorcist?
It's gonna come up for sure in the next 3 episodes. It's gonna have to.
Yeah, it's like the quintessential exorcism movie, obviously. But we wanted to take a look at what people are doing these days and lately with the exorcism subgenre, because this is one of the subgenres that seems to have legs. Like it's never going to get old. You're always going to be able to. You're always going to
find more in it.
Even if you get movies like The Black Coat's Daughter, which I know was considered for this series, which isn't necessarily a straight up exorcism movie, but it's a possession movie. So I don't know. I encourage you guys, if you guys want to, watch more possession exorcism movies to talk about during the week or these episodes. But the only one that I watched, I'm not able to talk about because I chose it.
Well, I mean, like exorcisms too. Like, there's always going to be something to talk about with that as time goes on, because like the general discussion or like discourse between like religion and spirituality and possession, that's going to change over time. So I think it's kind of one of those good genres within horror that kind of will never get stale, I like to think, because there's always going to be something, like whatever like the public like conscious like public viewpoints are, or like recent events or anything like that. It's kind of like a good breeding ground for like different stories to occur. So I think that's even probably why we have like 3 like solid picks to talk about that came out in the past like 15 years or so, which is not always the case with other subgenres.
No, and it is like, it's safe to say that we're going to be talking a little bit about religion in these episodes because it plays a key role in it. But like everyone to know that, like, I don't know, I'd like to think that we're all respectful enough to not be poo-pooing to an extent that it'll be offensive to people. I know we have religious listeners, so I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable or segregated, but we are going to be having an open conversation about our interpretations of what these are and how they work. So that's just a fair warning, but just know that we're going to do our best to not be those edgy atheists who just like shit on everything.
Remember when YouTube was nothing but like atheist content for some reason?
Yep. Now it's all flat earth stuff.
I feel like they're always just a little bit ahead of the curve with technology. Like whoever, find your local atheist and he'll have the biggest TV, the biggest newest one.
Like I feel like I don't know. I feel like maybe 5 years ago, like everything on YouTube was literally nothing but atheism. It kind of freaked me out a bit. I'm not gonna lie.
True.
It scared Kyle right off Facebook.
It scared me a little.
Off YouTube.
All right, fellas, do you want to talk about what we've been up to in the last couple of weeks?
Of course.
Yeah. Who wants to go first?
Well, not me, because I have nothing to talk about.
Kyle.
Classic.
Kyle.
It's a classic move.
I'm gonna virtually spank you.
I don't even have some like weird short film to talk about. I don't even have like a Bring It On sequel to bring it up on. Like I really have nothing. I'm bone dry right now.
That's fine. You just better show up for the main feature. That's all we ask.
Oh, we'll see if my agent allows it. I'll get in contact.
Boozy, do you want to take it away?
Yeah. I'm still kind of sniffing around for 2020. Like, hey, did I miss anything? And I decided to check out, because actually it's coincidentally that you mentioned Blackcoat's daughter. I checked out Oz Perkins' 2020 film, Gretel and Hansel.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah.
What did you?
Okay,
this one slipped my mind, and I am bummed about it. What did you think, Boozy?
I think it has all the makings of what makes Oz Perkins amazing, but I think this story is too restrictive for him to work with.
Okay.
I don't know. I maybe I'm not as huge into those fairy tale kind of stories, but it did seem like it just kind of stayed in this one idea, and it doesn't let him kind of move around and have more to work with. I think he is fantastic at creating these tense scenes, and there was those Blackcoat's daughter moments in there of like, this scary witch and everything, but then you kind of go back to it and it is this base fairy tale, and I don't know, it probably wasn't as dark as I would want from him, considering what else he's put out.
Yeah.
So what is like the approach though with the source material? Because I mean, there's a couple different ways you can kind of go with Gretel and Hansel, I guess. Is he sort of taking like some like liberties with the story, or is it more?
Well, I mean, you have to at this point, but I mean,
okay.
If you thought if I just said that base story, everyone kind of has that same idea, right? We have the same basic 3 characters and the same kind of arc. How we get there and how those relationships change, but it does feel like it once again we're treading out a fairy tale. You get what you get with it, and maybe that's just my bad, but I think it was very competently made, and it had a couple of cool moments. So
yeah, that's like I watched it once last year, and I was planning on watching it again because that was one that I actually considered for my top 10. But when I was thinking about my actual top 10, I had completely forgotten about it. So I guess that speaks volumes about it. But I really liked it. It's a really good looking movie. And like, that's, like Boozy said.
It's what you expect, right?
Yeah. But Oz Perkins he has a vision, and this is his version of Gretel and Hansel. So it's a little darker. It's very like pretty looking. Like he's very, he doesn't stray very far from the tripod. That's one thing I noticed about Oz Perkins.
A lot of sticks. It's all on sticks.
Yeah, he's very, very cool. But that's because he makes beautiful imagery, and like all of it, like he frames up, like some of his frames are just gorgeous. So it's just like, there's those types of filmmakers, but it won't connect for everyone, because that's the one thing that I felt it was missing was a little bit of speed. Like it needed just a little bit of a boost to get going or make you really actually scared, because it wasn't overly scary. I don't know. I really liked it though.
It's only 87 minutes. That's a good sign.
It was digestible, Kyle.
Boozy, let me ask you this to end off this film here. The top comment on Letterboxd is, if this had an A24 logo tacked onto it, reception would be different. What do you think about that?
Agreed.
You know what? Yeah, totally. And I think Oz Perkins makes those A24 stylistic. This is A24 Hansel and Gretel.
Right.
I'll agree with that. Whether the reception would be any different, I couldn't say. But
it's tough to say, because those A24 fanboys fucking hate movies. Well, at least on that.
Well, we know that
wouldn't change anything for me, and it didn't change anything for the fact that I really like the director, and that's the only reason I went to watch this.
I don't know. I don't necessarily mean that. Like, I feel like your opinion is sort of independent of that. But I'm curious, does it like the general like vibe and tone of the movie? Is it kind of similar to what you would maybe consider A24-esque or whatever?
Yeah, and there's a lot of things coming out right now that are all sort of in that similar vein. I think we're gonna see a lot of that coming up.
That's cool.
So whether that would be a good thing for a movie right now and going forward at this point, I don't know.
I'm gonna have to check this out because I did enjoy The Black Coat's Daughter. I actually haven't seen I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House yet either.
That is, I watched that long ago. Very stylistic, and I feel like I'm just trying to remember. It's a fairly long movie, and I feel like the story it's a very artsy style of film.
It's only 90 minutes, and you thought it was pretty long, so that is not a good sign.
So long, dude.
That's kind of how Gretel and Hansel felt too, though. Like it did feel longer than it was. Okay. But I think it's just because you're not looking at a bunch.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
Cool. I'll knock a couple off here. First, I want to mention though, I don't know, did you guys hear about Darren Aronofsky's he's teaming up with Jared Leto again to make a Blumhouse supernatural film.
What?
I was thinking of something else.
Yeah, it's called Adrift. Is what his new movie's called. That he's just signed on with Blumhouse and he's bringing Jared Leto back. So I'm of course like elated.
We're not okay with that.
I fucking hate Jared Leto.
Oh, I hate him too. But you cannot debate that he's an incredible actor. I guess Kyle could because you got a bunch of stupid opinions. But like,
okay, fair enough.
No, but like you know what I mean. No, but you
harsh take.
You shit on Jared Leto, but then you have a poster of Shia LaBeouf in your bedroom, and
not anymore.
It's one of those things. But no, I don't know. I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm curious to see how a Darren Aronofsky movie is going to translate through the Blumhouse banner. But I think that's a good thing. They obviously need to start bringing in some talent rather than they've been just pumping out, teen junk. They got to level the playing field a little bit here. And
do you think they're going to get to a point where Blumhouse, like, you're not going to really have an expectation as to what you're watching anymore just because they're going to pull in so many different things?
I'm going to be honest, that's how it's been for me the past like year and a half. Like they haven't put out a lot of stuff that's really excited me in a while. Right. They always have those like few sprinkled in there, but it's definitely oversaturated with the kind of young adult horror that I'm just not really into anymore. So that's
like Truth or Dare?
Correct. Yes. Truth or Dare, like The Gallows or that type of shit.
I thought you liked The Gallows.
Fuck no. You've said that twice on the show now. I hated that movie. Anytime it comes up, I thought you liked that. No.
I am way more excited for the other Darren Aronofsky film, The Whale, with Brendan Fraser.
Oh, yeah. Fuck
That's what I'm talking about.
Does he play the whale?
Correct. He's a morbidly obese fella in the film.
Darren Aronofsky was supposed to be, he owns the rights to a book that I read called The Good Nurse, which is about that nurse it was like a male nurse who was like basically he killed like 150 people or something just by poisoning their IV bags. And it's crazy. Like the book was unreal. But Aronofsky behind that, like he's I don't know, I love Darren Aronofsky, so I'm always excited for what he does. But while on that topic, though, I'm just going to knock off a book that I just finished. I finished reading True Indie by Don Coscarelli. So it's the director of Phantasm, The Beastmaster, John Dies at the End, all that kind of stuff. It's just a book, a memoir about his experiences starting out as a filmmaker, taking him all the way up to present day. I think the book was released, 2 or 3 years ago. I could be wrong, but it's fairly recent. But I listened to it on Audible so that it could be narrated by Don himself. And it was just an awesome book. And I highly recommend it to anybody considering making their own movies of any kind. It's just really, really interesting stuff. Specifically the Beastmaster portion of the book where like that movie's terrible. I know a lot of people really like it, but it's a bad movie. But hearing him talk about it and his experiences with like studio interference, there's so many incredible lessons that you can learn as like people who are just, even if you're just generally into movies, understanding like, how the sausage gets made. I got to stop using that analogy, but Jesus.
It's just really been thinking about making sausages lately.
How does it get made?
we're not going to reveal that here. That's too much.
The
but
Terror
yeah.
Table presents how sausage gets made.
Yeah, but I do want to mention, just like, I'm not going to spoil anything for the book because I want people to just read it and experience it themselves. But like the type of stories that you can find in this is like he's sharing a story about how he was on set for some reason at a like Dolph Lundgren workout video, and there were these two PAs on set who were just getting treated like shit, like PAs do for the most part, and the cinematographer was freaking out at them, like yelling at them, and apparently there was like dog shit. And it was filmed on a beach, and there was like dog shit in the frame that was on the beach, and these two PAs just got on their hands and knees and started cleaning it up with their bare hands. And then while they did that, they made feet marks in the sand. So they were like, hey, you got to fix these fucking feet marks, get them out of there. So one of the PAs started rolling down the hill, like rolling down the beach, and just like, just being treated like complete dirt. Yeah. And then he goes up, and Don is like, you know what? I want to meet these guys because they're the type of guys that I would kill. That they obviously will live and die on this set, and they want everything that they do to succeed. And one of them was Quentin Tarantino. So it's like, that was just such an amazing story. And I there's so many of them in there, like all the Phantasm stuff. He's just he's a very eloquent talker and writer. And I'm a fan of his work. I definitely I wouldn't consider myself the biggest Phantasm fan. I know a lot of people really love it, but that's one of the series that I want to go through again because I haven't seen them in a long, long time. I don't think I've ever seen any past two, but it's been a while.
Isn't there a lot of them?
I think there's 4 or 5 now, and one of them is for sure hot trash.
Right.
But I can't remember which one.
I have to ask Mitch. I know this story is supposed to be really inspiring, and I appreciate that. But do you think Tarantino was just down there to look at feet? Like he just happened to be. Do you know what I mean? Like the one guy was doing his job, and Tarantino was just like, yo, that's a great idea. Like, you know what I mean? Just kind of snuck in there. He can
get close. Yeah, he just like rolls down and then starts licking Dolph's feet.
What if that was literally like how his career got started? Is he was trying to just look at some feet, and then they're like, this guy's got it.
It's really stuck, It seemed to work out, actually.
Yeah, but it was an incredible book, so I highly recommend checking it out. Yeah, even if you just get an Audible subscription, you'll get a free credit each month, and I highly recommend listening to it because it's really cool listening to the actual person who's sharing these stories, read it out loud, and I've really loved it.
For the record, we're not sponsored by Audible. However, if Audible wants to sponsor us, please feel free.
Right. That's what I was gonna say. We should like do our own commercials and then just hope that it gets like League of Legends.
I love my ND mattress. I have a great sleep, and it showed up right on my doorstep.
That's the ND mattress. That's the one that's in frame that I'm looking at right now, Kyle.
Oh, it actually is. How funny.
Wow, that is so convenient.
Well, we really support ND mattresses. Okay, I'm going to knock off one more quick one because I'm not going to talk about much because it's not a straight-up horror movie, but Kyle talked about it on a previous episode. But I finally got a chance to check out Promising Young Woman, which is the movie starring Carey Mulligan, Bo Burnham, and a bunch of other really cool actors that you would just recognize from other things you've seen, especially if you're a fan of Glow. This movie's going to blow your mind at the end. But yeah, I'm not going to speak too much about it because everybody's already seeming to talk about it, but I'm just here to throw my hat in saying that this movie fucking rules. I loved Promising Young Woman, and I wasn't sure if I was the first like half hour, 45 minutes, but I really admired the direction it went and how it was constantly subverting your expectations of what was going to happen. I truly didn't see what was coming. It's not like a bulletproof idea there. I'm sure there are holes that you can poke if you really want to, but I think that's a dumb thing to do with a movie like this.
I agree, Mitch. I think that is definitely there's a lot of interesting discussions happening surrounding this movie right now. Some people really love it. Some people really hate it, actually.
Well, it's understandable that it's triggering for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely.
It deals with Carey Mulligan, who's basically she goes to bars and pretends like she's blackout drunk and lets guys take her home, and then I'm not going to give anything else away, but she is pretending to be blackout drunk, and so it's kind of like a revenge-ish tale, but fuck, it was good. I really, really enjoyed it.
I mean, it stars the star of Shazam, Adam Brody.
Yes,
and that's pretty much enough for me to get going, really.
No, dude, the selling point for me was I came for Bo Burnham and I stayed for Carey Mulligan. I love Bo Burnham, but Carey Mulligan was so good in it.
I mean, I don't think I've ever. I mean, I didn't expect to give a 4-star letterbox rating to a film with McLovin in it. So that should give you an idea that this movie is
Wait, are
definitely
you
worth
shitting
watching.
on Superbad?
No, you love
No, I love Superbad. I'm just saying it's not 2006 anymore. Things have changed.
Right. Okay.
But
have changed.
Things have changed. But no, Mitch, I'm with you. I really liked this movie. I have friends who don't like this movie, but I'm not like shitting on their opinion because it's like there is a lot of ways you can kind of take a film like this. I think it, for the most part, it does a really good job of tackling the subject matter. That's kind of my main takeaway of it. I think it kind of, to me, it's swung and it hit, but I can understand how it could be a miss for others, for sure.
No, I totally agree. And like, if I once again, I don't want to speak for someone, especially in a movie this sensitive, but someone who's not here, but Courtney and I watched it and she liked it even more than I did. So, and it was really having a strong impact on her. So it was nice to see that, obviously it's connecting with some of the right people. But yeah, I can understand not liking that one, but I really enjoyed it. So I recommend checking that one out if you haven't yet. Boozy, you want to knock another one off?
Yeah. All right. So I checked out a film from 2011, directed by Lynn Ramsey, titled "We Need to Talk About Kevin."
Oh,
I know you guys have mentioned this before, and I was like, yeah, I'll finally watch it. So this actually isn't the first Lynn Ramsey film I've seen. Actually, I didn't realize till after. I was like, oh, I really liked her style, and I didn't realize she was
awesome.
From You Were Never Really Here is the other film I've seen from her.
Yeah,
a banger
so good.
Film.
I just watched that.
Also a great film.
I just watched that again like 2 weeks ago, and holy fuck, that movie's awesome.
Man, so what did you think? I haven't seen this movie, I think, since it came out. Actually,
Me too.
So what'd you think?
I want to give it a positive review, but it's so hard to be like thrilled about it because the subject matter is like so disturbing in this.
Right.
But yeah, I thought this was a really good movie, and they did an excellent job of, I guess, portraying a lot of emotions of disconnect between family members that you don't normally see. It basically takes a left at every right you're supposed to in a film, and then anytime, because the whole movie is based off of a relationship between a mother and her son, for the people who are listening, and kind of how it deteriorates to a kind of school shooting situation.
Pretty scary.
And John C. Reilly's in it, which is also odd.
Man, that guy.
He's in tons of these movies.
What a legend.
Yeah, he's in tons of these movies, and but you don't expect almost every movie I've seen at the Roxy, John C. Reilly sneaks his way in there.
It's
like Cyrus.
He's a funny guy because he actually got started doing that shit, like in like PTA movies and stuff. But then he spent like a decade doing like films with Will Ferrell. So like, there's a weird perception of like
I think that's it. Is you expect him to drop some comedy bombshells, and then he plays such a serious. It's hard to. Totally. I guess that's another thing that I think makes a little bit more of an interesting film is if you have that background watching that and having that disconnect with him as well. But I think this is a very it's a very good movie, but I think it's a very hard subject matter for a lot of people. I wouldn't say it's like an enjoyable film. Like,
no, it shouldn't be.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. If you did enjoy it though, I would recommend watching Ratcatcher. That's another great film of hers.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's one of her first films. I'm not totally sure, but
like I'm sure like Kevin in this isn't as deranged as Mikey, which Mitch and Mitch talked about.
Did you watch it yet?
I haven't watched it yet.
I have not. Okay. I have not listened to either. I'm kind of scared.
Well, it's coming out on Tuesday. Yeah.
I by the time watch Mikey though.
I watch it. Me and Mitch both watched it twice last week. But yeah, when that episode's dropping 3 days after we're recording this, so people know what we're talking about.
I thought for some reason you put it out yesterday and I missed it or something like that.
No. Okay, I'm gonna knock off another one. How many more do you have, Boozy?
I have. Let me pull it up right here. I have one more.
Okay, cool. I have two more, and I'll start with Hunted, which is a brand new movie that's on Shudder. They take the core story of Little Red Riding Hood and turn it into a vicious and brutal survival slasher movie. And man, I thought it was so badass. I thought this movie was wicked. And so the synopsis on IMDb is, this is a quote: "The company of wolves is better than that of man. Once upon a frenzied time, woman meets man, woman dances with man, man kisses woman, man grips woman, woman escapes man, man chases woman. Nothing new. Or is there? And it is wild. It is such a crazy movie, and I really, really enjoyed it. It's another one that I see is pretty divisive online, but it constantly had my attention, and like the practical effects and the violence in the film is so good. And so cringe-inducing. I thought it was really, really good. So I definitely encourage people to check that one out. It also opens up with like a gorgeous animated sequence where a lady is telling her kid. I thought it was her grandson because she seems kind of old. But the lady's telling her kid a slightly rendered version of Red Riding Hood. And it's a very stylistic animated sequence, and it's a really cool way to open the movie. But it's one of those ones that once it truly gets going, it doesn't stop, and it's really intense.
I'm intrigued by this one, man. Like it's directed by Vincent Perinaud, probably pronouncing that wrong, but he co-directed Persepolis. Have you guys seen that animated film?
I haven't seen it actually, but I know he's like an up and comer.
Well, I mean that's like 13 years ago now. I was curious what this guy's been up to because that's like a fucking like classic basically. It's a great film. It's an animated film, though, so that kind of answered my question a little bit there, Mitch, saying that there's an animated sequence that opens up this film, because I was like, well, God, what has this guy been up to? But he's been making horror films, actually, for the past, like, 10 years, so it's kind of interesting. So I'm curious to check this one out.
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was wicked. So, yeah, that's my... that one's on Shudder in all countries, I believe, so check out Hunted. Boozy, you can knock off your last one, and then I got one more.
Okay. So this one, we're talking about a TV series for my last one. I recently, because Mitch bestowed upon me some Netflix, I was able to check out Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous, which is already on its second season. I know, but I'm just getting into it now. It feels like this show came out of nowhere. They might have just dropped 2 seasons like right off the bat or something.
What is this show? I've never heard of this.
It's an animated Jurassic Park. And I believe the timeline lines up with like Jurassic World, like the first one.
Mm-hmm.
But this is it's such a cool show. I was a little skeptical at the start because it's very geared towards children. I think that's something we've all seen in the Jurassic World movie series that was going on and kind of how they're marketing things. But it's very, like technology hip and like kid hip. Oh God, I sound old. But it's really enjoyable, guys. Like I have to say, it has a lot of charm to it, and the animation style is kind of how you like. Into the Spider-Verse kind of animation style?
Okay.
Whoa, really?
Wow. Yeah, it's
that's high praise.
It's really cool, and I've really been enjoying it. And for like a kids show, I'm actually super invested in like, what's gonna happen next?
I've heard it's dark.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the thing that maybe like keeps drawing me to it is that there's more than just a kids. Like I feel like they put a lot of emphasis in like, hey, a lot of the adults watching this who have kids right now probably grew up with Jurassic Park, so they need something to watch while these kids are watching this.
Well, don't they, they like, this might be a little bit of a spoiler, but it's also a Jurassic Park series, but don't these kids get like actually eaten by dinosaurs? I've heard it's pretty fucking wild like that.
Well, I haven't gotten any of that yet, but so far they have been put in danger, so it's very fun to watch. I would definitely recommend for the whole family.
I'm surprised but not surprised that you brought this up, Boozy. Like, it makes complete sense because you love Jurassic Park, but at the same time, like, I did not expect you to drop an animated Netflix series on me right now.
No. And like, honestly, I kept looking at it and I was like, Fallen Kingdom, I really did not like what could possibly be in an animated series that would like really do it for me. But for some, like, this is amazing so far. I'm digging it.
I still haven't seen Jurassic World or the other one.
I don't really expect that from you, Kyle. You don't seem like a.
It's not really my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
This actually kind of seems more up my alley, to be completely honest. All right, cool.
All right, I'll knock off another one. I checked out the new-ish film that was owned by Fox when they sold to Disney, and it's basically been sitting on the shelf for 3 years, and they finally put it out, and it's called The Empty Man. So this one, a lot of people are talking about. I saw. Let's get it out of the way here.
Yeah, you have to say that. Boozy, you gotta say it.
So what?
The pee pee poo poo man.
The pee pee poo. No, I was just thinking of like
No.
all the analogies you could have for this. It'd be like me 10 minutes like after having like the biggest piss of my life. Like,
No, okay, not even that. Boozy said this is the most to-be-ass name, which is so
oh,
funny.
it is true. Yeah. This is like the most to-be-ass name
It's
for a
very
movie.
true. The empty man.
The spooky guy.
I saw the poster and the tagline, and I had no fucking interest in watching this thing at all because I just
I'm
know.
surprised it got past you here. Like,
Well, that's because I've been hearing some really good, like a really solid praise for the movie. But first, let's read this tagline here.
okay.
The first night you hear him, the second night you see him, the third night he finds you. The empty man. That is fucking atrocious. That is awful. Who let that pass?
That's not a good look. No.
No, but the thing is,
I'm
this
getting
movie,
Bye-Bye Man flashbacks.
yeah, but it's not like that at all. That's the thing, and that's why a lot of people are really loving this movie. I know John Allison being one of them. I'm seeing a ton of praise for it online, so I wanted to check it out because some people are saying that it's kind of like it's a police procedural but mixed with the Slender Man story, and that's pretty apt. So it's like a different. It's almost like a spaghetti or creepy. What the? Oh yeah, sorry, creepy
Spaghetti Western.
Yeah, It's like a creepy pasta-esque
No flying
story.
spaghetti monster. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah. But it was based on the graphic novel by Colin Bunn, and which was released through Boom Studios, which I got a ton of Boom comics. So I haven't read the book, hadn't even heard of it before. But everyone was talking about the prologue of this movie because it is one. I'm not going to give a bunch away. Actually, I'm not going to give anything away. Just going to share my thoughts. But the prologue of this movie is fucking wicked. It starts out and I was like, wow, this is not what I was expecting. It was definitely more in line with something like The Ritual from Netflix a couple of years ago, which is a movie I love.
Mitch.
It is, but watch the first 20 minutes, Boozy. You will be shitting you will love it. I'm actually curious to hear what you'll think about the rest of it. That's why I feel kind of bad because I definitely don't agree with everyone else. I think by the end of the movie, it's kind of a mess. I think it's a 2-hour and 20-minute movie, which is a horror movie, which is just makes no sense. You could have taken out 40 minutes of. Do you want to pause, Kyle?
You okay?
Sorry. The doorbell rang, which I haven't heard the doorbell in like 8 months. So I was like, wait, this is weird.
Okay.
It's my neighbor brought cookies.
Oh, that's baller.
Yo, shout out your neighbor.
Sorry. I just was like, that's fucking weird. Why is the doorbell ringing? So
I thought we were gonna be in that fucking Skype movie, like host right now.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just wrap up my thoughts on The Empty Man. So like I said, the first like prologue is awesome. But I had a tough time connecting with like the teen friend group, and that's one my issue with the movie is that they're throwing like fucking 15 ideas at the screen here, and it's got so many fake outs throughout it. Like that's what's really interesting about it. But the thing is, so a couple of them are so silly and just don't make any sense, or they just feel really out of place in the movie. I think that they could have really tightened it up by, narrowing it down to the 8 great ideas that they had rather than throw 15. Like I'm definitely probably exaggerating with the numbers here, but it's a lot. It's a lot. By the end of the movie, like I guess so the director, I'm
fascinated by this guy.
Well, he had worked with David Fincher on what's that?
The Social Network, but he's worked on Zodiac. He's worked on a bunch of stuff.
Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and you can definitely see his the end of the movie feels like a 90s Fincher movie in the editing sense. Like it's very very Seven in a way. But overall, like the movie itself it's solid. It just I didn't love it as much as everyone else does, I think. But the tone is it's just strange because a lot of it feels like a mystery. Other parts of it feel like cheaper haunting movies, and then other things are more reminiscent of like a CW show. But the cool thing about it is that it's constantly evolving. It's constantly moving. That's definitely not a slow-paced movie. But some plot points and hooks remind me of a movie from the last 5 years that I adore. And I don't think I have heard anyone shit talk it, so I don't want to mention that right now. But there's some really cool ideas thrown at the screen here, and I think some people are going to really dig it. But at the end of the day, I just feel like it's too long. Like it's
Weird.
Definitely too long. I think they could have tightened it up.
2 hours and 17 minutes.
Yep.
That's
you
psychotic.
They could have easily pulled 40 minutes from it.
Wow.
Because you could have just taken out some of the really like cheesy stuff that doesn't work. Because there's a lot of stuff in it that doesn't work, but then the stuff that does, like, it was one of the most conflicting watching experiences. Because the opening, I was like, holy fuck, this is awesome, I'm all in. And then like 10 minutes later, I'm like, why does this feel like Riverdale? And why did they model that main actress off of Will from Stranger Things? You'll see like her fucking haircut. It's a crime. It's a crime.
I've had a couple friends who have basically just said like the first 20 minutes are fantastic and turn it off after that.
Yep. I don't know. I don't think I would necessarily agree with that.
That sounds a little harsh based on what you're saying. But I find this director, David Pryor, to be really interesting because, and it kind of makes sense from what you're saying, Mitch, because he's worked with Fincher, but he's also directed a bunch of feature-length behind-the-scenes documentaries.
Yeah.
Like one on Zodiac, one on The Social Network, one on Inside Llewyn Davis, one on The Fly, like Cronenberg's The Fly, one on Inside Llewyn Davis. But to me, actually, okay, so at first when I was looking this guy up, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like he's a person who like has like a behind the scenes knowledge. Like that's actually really vital if you're going to like make your own film. That's really cool. But now when you said this movie is too long and it's 2 hours and 17 minutes, that makes sense because this is a guy that actually just loves everything and wants to include everything.
That's exactly it, man.
Hour and a half long behind the scenes documentaries and doesn't want to cut anything.
And that's why it makes sense. I don't want to shit talk the movie by any means. It's just my opinion that it could have been shorter, but like, cause there's a couple sequences in it that I'm like, man, that was some top notch horror that you wouldn't expect from like the movie. It just, I don't understand the tone. It's really all over the place. He, like you said, Kyle, he throws a ton of ideas at the screen. And I think someone needed to just like, slap him on his snout and say, no.
His snout? Is he a dog?
Like when you roll up some newspaper and smack the dog who shits on the floor.
I don't know, man.
That's what I would have done.
I'm going to go a soft no comment on that one.
Don't make me smack you, Kyle.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Snout.
Okay,
but
yes, I got it.
That's everything I got. So like I said, I don't want to discourage anyone from checking it out, but it was definitely a pretty lukewarm for me. Like I think I gave it a 3 on Letterboxd. It's fine, but I know I'm going to forget about it in a month. But yeah, I guess we can get into the main feature if you guys are interested.
I'm pretty interested.
All right. We will see you guys on the other side.
I don't care about my reputation. What I care about is telling Emily Rose's story.
Holy Church venerates thee as her guardian and protector. To thee, the Lord has entrusted the souls of the redeemed to be led into heaven. Pray therefore the God of peace to crush Satan beneath our feet, that we may no longer return man's captivity.
Do you understand how long they can put you away for this?
I want people to hear what only I can tell.
And what is that?
What really happened to Emily and why.
So she believed that her actual possession began that night at the hospital?
I think she did.
Emily had epilepsy. Father Moore's beliefs are based on superstition.
Did Father Moore ask you to give her any medical help?
I couldn't help her.
Why couldn't you help her?
Because there are no injections against the devil.
Emily? Hey, can you hear me?
Demons exist, whether you believe in them or not. Just be careful, Aaron. There are forces surrounding this trial. Emily, can you hear me? It has begun.
For the glory of God.
And we are at our main feature, in which we're going to be discussing Boozy's pick of the podcast for the Exorcism series, which is The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which is directed by Scott Derrickson, who people would know from, he directed Deliver Us from Evil. He wrote and directed Deliver Us from Evil. He did Sinister, which is a movie that a lot of people love, and Doctor Strange. And I believe upcoming he's doing another Doctor Strange movie. Is that not the...
I think he's executive producing, because I think Raimi's doing that one, right?
Whoa, right. I forgot about that. Holy shit, I can't wait.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
If that's true, oh man, I can't wait.
I'm almost positive.
Like Sam Raimi?
I'm gonna double check, but like I'm pretty sure. We're on the Wikipedia. Yeah, he is.
Holy fuck. I just don't know how I forgot that.
There's a lot of conspiracy theories about that actually right now, because he's doing that. Which and then Raimi of course did the old Spider-Man movies, and now there's a new Spider-Man that will involve the old Spider-Man in it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot.
Doc Ock's coming back and shit.
Yeah.
They're just trying to find a way to squeeze more shit into this universe.
So,
anyway. But we're not here to talk about those. We're here to talk about this exorcism movie. So the synopsis of it is a lawyer takes on a negligent homicide case involving a priest who performed an exorcism on a young girl. The film is starring Laura Linney, Tom Wilkinson, and Jennifer Carpenter, who we know and hate from Dexter.
And also White Chicks, where she plays.
She was in White Chicks?
Yeah, she's Lisa.
Oh man, she was also.
Don't you remember Lisa from White Chicks?
Yeah, come on.
I gotta say, it's been a while since I've seen White Chicks.
Or Laura Linney from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Out of the Shadows. Come on.
Oh god. She's someone who, she's also an Ozark, and I just she's one of those actors that she bothers me. I don't know. I'm not a Laura Linney fan.
I kind of, well, whatever. We'll talk about it a bit more. I like her though. I do like her.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about it then, boys. I know I want to also talk about the true story in which this was based upon, but I think we'll start off by talking to Boozy about why you chose this movie for an exorcism film.
I chose this one because I remember I have talked about this movie on the podcast before, and it was a long time ago. It was right after Hereditary had come out, because I wanted to get my fix of possession movies. I was riding high on Hereditary vibes. So I remember watching this one and feeling kind of lukewarm on it. So I wanted to kind of check it out again and just see maybe where we're at, because it is always considered, it is always thrown in there when we're talking about possession, more recent ones. This one does get mentioned quite often, and you'll see it's, usually if you do those lists or whatever, it's always thrown in there. So it was just kind of it was a time for us to collectively visit it. And I don't know if Kyle's ever seen it, so it's kind of interesting to see, from Kyle's perspective, where he is on this.
Well, I'm glad you've asked, Boozy.
Yeah.
I've actually never seen this, no, but I'm very aware of it, I guess, if that makes any sense. To the point where I feel like growing up, this movie was everywhere for some reason. It was very much touted as I don't know, the scariest movie in a couple of years kind of thing. I feel like it was getting that kind of buzz at the time. Sort of, I guess, in comparison, its contemporaries at the time were House of Wax, right? So it's comparing this to House of Wax, this was a more of a true horror film. Snobs would say, I'll just get off the bat, I prefer House of Wax to this, but that's just me. I think this is also not at all what I expected. I will also say that. I didn't know we were going to get so much courtroom drama. However, that is a lot of the strengths of this film at the same time. This film takes a very interesting approach to the case.
Storytelling, yes.
And that it focuses on a case, which was not at all what I expected, to be honest. I thought it would be more so just the exorcism occurring and kind of, working through the event itself. And so I was definitely surprised, more or less, just generally speaking. But I don't know. I won't get into my full thoughts here. I think this movie does a lot of good, but at the same time, I think it was pretty boring and too long. Just gonna put it like that.
All right.
How long was it? Was 2 hours and 20 minutes, wasn't it?
2 hours and 1 minute exactly.
2 hours and 1, just to give you that extra.
It's actually on IMDb. It's 1 hour and 59 minutes.
Oh my god. Okay. Well,
whoa.
But I don't know, man. I thought it was definitely too long. But I don't want to shit on it too much, because at the same time, what it was actually doing, the more I thought about it, was pretty thought provoking, and it actually tackled this specific angle of telling the story in an interesting way. I do think that.
Cool. Well, I have seen this movie multiple times by now. I saw it in the theater when it came out, and I remember it terrifying me. I was with a group of friends, like we were talking about before, where we had like a whole row basically to ourselves. The theater was packed though, and it got a reaction out of everyone. And this was back in the day where I was riding my bike and locking my bike up at Center Mall to go into the movie theater. And so I had to bike home after the movie, and we went to a later one at the time. It was like 9:30 or something like that. And like you said, it's a longer film, well, 2 hours ish. And I remember being fucking horrified. It really worked for me. This was still around the time where I considered myself a Catholic. I grew up in Catholic schools, going to church with my family, and of course, until the family was demolished by divorce.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No way.
And then I found out that my
Mitch,
mom dated one of our priests.
I didn't know that.
That's a bomb. I just dropped that, and you guys just flew right over it. But
What?
whatever.
No, I was wedding.
Your mom dated the priest.
My mom dated the priest that baptized me. I'm sure she wouldn't want to talk about this or want me talking about this on air, but it happened, so I'm saying it. And I used to think like I'm
sorry.
My family notoriously knows that I always thought he was Jesus. Like when I went to church.
God, you should not be saying this. This could like get used in a case somewhere.
Anyways, yeah. So the movie worked for me then, though. Back to the movie. The movie worked for me, and I went home and I went on my dad's computer, and I remember like seeking out the real story, and then I stumbled across the Annalise Michel case, and I found the real tapes that was based off of, and it just petrified me. And after a couple of years, I always look at this one again every like 2 or 3 years because I really like it, and or I did really like it. Now I'm just going to come right out and say that I think that this should be considered a modern classic. Like, I think this movie is fucking awesome, and I think Kyle's insane. But I also think that, yeah, I honestly think it is. And
you gave us a 3.5. How is that a modern classic rating?
Yeah, 3.5.
That's not a modern classic. Get the fuck out of here, man.
3.5.
I'm not saying it's a bad movie, but it's definitely not a modern classic.
I have my reasonings as to why, with the things I don't like about it, but the strengths are strong enough. And that's, you know what? I gave Joyride a 3.5 too, and I love that movie. Like,
I mean, I guess, but like, just.
Because
I throw it around modern classic if you don't actually love it that much.
I do
Kyle
love it.
Has a point.
You do have a point, Kyle. But the reason that I gave it's because it does have flaws. But you know what? Some of my favorite, The Evil Dead has flaws. Like, and I just hold that as on a little bit of a higher pedestal because it's Sam Raimi, and that movie had such a profound impact on me. And it is a better movie. But The Exorcism of Emily Rose, I think this movie didn't really get it to do at the time because so many people were going in expecting a balls out crazy exorcism movie, but what they got was a really intriguing drama, courtroom drama, like you said, which is stuff that I love in movies. I love Law and Order. I love any movie that is set in a courtroom. I am just there. I'm very into it. Right. So I just love that setting, and I think that this was a really interesting movie to tackle, especially after learning about the real case and everything. And I think they did a really good job of turning this real case, which you can debate whether you think it was real or not. They turned it into a compelling movie that entertained both sides. I really like that it wasn't so one-sided for a lot of the movie. And by the end, they definitely take a stance because that's history. Why are you giving me that look, Kyle?
Well, okay, you I don't know, like you kind of said at the end there, they definitely take a side is kind of my
at the very end, but they at least entertain it. It's not from the very beginning. I
don't know. Entertain seems like a strong word. Like it's pretty clear. I think the stance the film is taking. I don't necessarily disagree with that stance, but I do think it's quite clear, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Maybe I'm just a fucking dummy. But
you're not a dummy. I guess like that was something that I definitely I kind of struggled with a little bit watching this. I just wasn't really sure what the movie was like trying to say exactly, because I understand it's covering a true story, so like it's going to probably do its best to tackle the true case, like what actually happened. That just makes sense. But at the same time, like it was definitely presenting this kind of like dynamic of how I don't know how to say this exactly, but like religion over science, basically, right?
Right.
In a lot of aspects, which is natural for like what actually happened. From my like brief knowledge of this, Mitch, you know more about what actually happened. I looked it up really briefly to get an idea.
We'll talk about it after.
But to me, that makes sense. I don't have a problem with that at all. But I do think in that case, it's kind of like I almost wanted them to like kind of go further on one side, I guess, then, because I kind of feel like it played it a little too safe in a sense, where it's like, okay, if it's just going to be a film about religion, maybe relish in that a little bit more without being preachy, because the film wasn't preachy, which is something I really liked about it. Or revel on the other side, where it's like, how can we like interweave religion into sort of facts, for lack of a better term? How can we do that? And I think the film tries to do that, but I do think it gets a bit muddled, sort of. Yeah. I think there isn't really a hard stance, and I shouldn't say that there is a hard stance, because it does end up being very much sort of on a spirituality aspect, but the film takes a while to really, kind of accept the stance it wants, and it lacks that kind of identity throughout the film, unfortunately, which I think is the only thing that made me sort of, I guess, go back on maybe how I was enjoying it up until maybe the last act or so, because I was kind of enjoying these courtroom drama moments, and then it would kind of flash back to like the flashback moments where you would kind of get more horror elements of like what was happening, and Emily Rose like going berserk, and that stuff was really engaging. But then when it would kind of go back to the strictly like kind of legal side of things, I was more so taken out of it rather than being like put into a complete like narrative. I was getting like pushed back and forth rather than like really getting a full package. That was kind of my main issue.
The pacing is an issue because of the type of story that they're telling. And I think I think the reason why I might think that I enjoy the route that it went is because like I have done like, well, back when it first came out, I wasn't like fucking throwing on my glasses and running to the library to try to learn everything about Exorcism of Emily Rose. But I did enough reading to know that the whole case was muddled. This whole situation was muddled. Anytime that you bring a spirituality into a courtroom, it's going to be muddled, and it's going to be difficult to actually confirm what is and isn't happening, because you're filled with mostly skeptical people and then highly religious people. And it's the reason we have the separate of church and state.
But I don't know if that's necessarily like a reason for the film to be muddled. If anything, the film should take a chance to sort of make some clarity of that situation in hindsight, and sort of take a moment to reflect and present it in a way based on historical evidence and artistic interpretation, I suppose.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. Like your points are valid, and I want to clear up that I do think the movie is flawed. Specifically,
but it's a modern classic. Let's not forget.
It's a great horror movie. This is a really good horror movie, and I will stand by that. But I do think it's flawed, and like that's the thing, is this was one of the movies I don't know if I can say that it started this whole trend, but the whole CGI droopy faces thing.
Like that and Grave Encounters.
I was thinking that too.
It's so bad.
It's like around the time where it started it, for sure.
Yeah, that shit just is
that
never
scary?
scary.
What is that ever scary? That's the thing.
Apparently, it scared Courtney.
It might have been. Wow. It might have been scared. Like, I'm sorry, it might have been scary then. I think like this would have been the only time it could have passed, maybe 2005.
Do you mind if I interject upon something that you guys are both having a very interesting conversation that I want to add to a little bit?
Sorry, get in.
No. And I was loving the energy. So I just want to say that like I kind of feel myself sitting a little bit in the middle, because half of this movie is really good, and the other half of it is its own thing, which is fine, but together it's the pacing that really is the problem. And it comes down to, I kind of was trying to figure out why I was having trouble connecting with this film, because I think when it actually does cut to the Emily Rose stuff and her doing, like Kyle was saying, like a lot of the crazier stuff, I did love like the possession elements of like, the voice changing and the different languages for eating bugs, that sort of stuff. It was just more or less, I kind of realized that there was no stakes for me watching it, which kind of took me out of it a little bit, because they had all these really interesting, like, I'm going to use the example of the one where she breaks out of the hospital and goes to the church. I think that's like the first time she really gets possessed, right? And her boyfriend shows up and sees that. So that all happens, and then it just kind of cuts to a courtroom. So it loses all this tension of like, oh, is she gonna like maybe attack him? And I understand that they're trying to be a little bit more accurate to how the case is. It's just when you're presented stuff like that and it's so all over the place, because like I will give, and I've thought about this deeply, and I know this will bring a big old smile to Mitch's face, is I think the way they set up the whole family dynamic in Annabelle Creation does a better job than what this film is doing with the same basic idea. If you want to kind of break it down, is that idea that at the end they're not that those movies are the same, but it's kind of that idea that they both take place at this kind of what would it be, like a farm kind of,
basically.
Yeah, exactly, separate from everything. Whereas like Emily Rose, they had all these really cool like her wandering in the mist. They had all these great set designs, or her in the barn and everything, but they never set it up to be like, oh, that's the family barn enough. It felt like nothing was anybody's. Yeah. Whereas like when I want to say with Annabelle Creation is the whole time you're more afraid because you're like, oh, this is their house. You're in this house constantly. Whereas this one, it's like, I'm at a hospital. I was at and then that's another thing, is I was having trouble with her character, because at one point they bring to attention this doll that she has, but at another point they say that she's 19 and just got accepted to school, and she's in like a grad university kind of thing. And then all of a sudden she kind of reverts back to almost being this child, which I know is kind of closer to the age that the real account is based off of. Right. I don't know. It's hard to keep track of that character and figure out where she's at and where everybody else is at. That's kind of the one thing that I realized. Like, this movie has a ton of great visuals. Like, even the box art is that, her wandering through the mist, which is an iconic shot. And it looks great. All that stuff looks great. But it's kind of that idea of like, where's the stakes within that kind of bothered me watching it again.
Yeah, that's a good point, Boozy. I mean, that's a tough thing that this director would have to tackle with a true story like this, right?
Right.
I mean,
but like let's say the scene where she's in the barn and the horses get out. Like, give me something that like she had any connection to these horses. Like, I did like the idea that she had all these cats and they did the callback that the cats attack.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah,
it's that idea that they set that up, so when you saw those cats come in, you're like, oh, she always took in these cats. They're gonna work with her. Whereas like, give me something with the horses. And I know this is such a minor detail, but you felt so detached from everything that was going on. It was like we're chasing her around. Like, I didn't even believe that was like her sister in that moment. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't think it's a minor detail at all, Boozy. I think you strike a really good point, because like, I think generally speaking, the courtroom, I guess like modern day aspect to me,
like the Law and Order stuff.
I think that's probably the strongest part of the film, if I'm being completely honest. And because of that, the past tense stuff and the more like horror elements, they kind of feel just like shock rather than substance, And the shock is actually pretty effective, and there's some really terrifying, gruesome shit in this film. But you make a good point where it's kind of like, okay, like it's almost like a prolonged jump scare, like one really long jump scare, where it's not necessarily like a bad thing. It's like effective for what it's trying to do, but there's not really like anything more to it than that. Because the character of Emily Rose, even though we see her several times on screen, we only know who she is from other people saying who she is. We never get her to really explain who she is as a person.
Exactly. And we're given right from the start that she's dead. So we have to build this character and care about a character who we know has already failed all this stuff. So seeing it is more of that. You're right, Kyle. Is that kind of that shock value idea. Like that. Another scene is like, it's another great scene is when her boyfriend wakes up from sleeping and she's
my favorite.
And it's an iconic.
It's so
and
creepy.
I will 100%.
That is great. Absolutely.
It is great. But it's because nothing happens after she goes blah. It cuts to the courtroom again. If it was something where like she chased her boyfriend to the bathroom and he like locked himself in there or something, just give me that like extra bit of tension. That scene like is so effective. It's just it is the fact that it kind of railroads itself. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's what it does a lot in this.
So it sounds like you wanted more horror. You wanted them to lean more horror, whereas Kyle was enjoying the court side of things because it was just an interesting conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it was.
Those are both very valid, and like that's the thing. I know that I shouldn't have came out here with swinging the word modern
classic while you're throwing a 3.5 on them.
Fuck it, I'm still standing by it. I think it's a classic, and I think it's going to be something.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. But no, but I have those issues as well. What's funny is that we all have different issues with the story, and mine is that I think they could have spent more time with the parents and the actual family.
Yeah,
I agree.
Because
I definitely agree.
they're the ones who called the priests and insisted on their child having an exorcism rather than continuously seeking out more medical attention. So that's something that they could have improved upon. But I just think, like Boozy, you had mentioned I think the horror scenes, for the most part, really work when they're not doing the droopy face thing.
Yes.
That's just lame. It's so lame. It's not scary. It deflates any tension that you're building. But then you have the scene where, like, even when she's going into the church, like you mentioned, and she's contorting her back. By the way, I normally, like, I don't like Jennifer Carpenter because she's really good at what she does. She always plays those unlikable characters or those annoying characters. But she's doing the job right. And I think that she was perfectly cast for this because she's also creepy before she's even possessed. And like, just like her stature and the way that she carries herself, it's just, she's very thin and she can contort herself in certain ways.
Can I ask, like, how tall is she? Because there was one scene where
She's
they
tall.
show her and she looks like she's like 4 foot nothing. So I don't know if that was like it was like a camera trick or something to make her look younger, but I was like, she should not be built to the size that she is.
Yeah.
I think I couldn't help but think, like, watching her in this film, if this was released now, that like everything just would have been like memed to death. Isn't that? It's kind of I like a sick feel, like, where it's like, wow, I like definitely watch movies differently now. You know, like
Right.
Yeah. But I don't know. I personally felt like you could feel her pain throughout the movie, and I thought that was enough character development in her because, like you guys said, like while your opinion's entirely valid, they decided to take the approach where the movie opens up with the priest in prison knowing that she's dead. So that isn't going to work for a lot of people because that almost deflates any tension because you already know what's happening. But I think what you're supposed to care about more is the priest and whether he was just in what he did and where he didn't, and the family and what they did. And I'll come outright and say it after doing a lot of research on this movie and the real case. I still think that priest was guilty as fuck, and I think the family should have been more held accountable. Because like there's too much proof. Like she died of malnutrition. Like she's licking up her own piss and eating fucking spiders. I don't know if they do. I don't think she licks up her own pee in the movie.
No.
But in real life,
something about the rating for that where like you really can't show that shit.
Yeah.
That's interesting then, Mitch, because that makes me kind of like that's too bad actually, because I felt like knowing like what you're saying about what actually happened, or like sort of what you personally think, I suppose. I wish they would have put more of that in the film then. I wish that was a bit more evident.
But that's my stupid atheist. But I'm not even atheist. I'm like, if anything, agnostic. Like,
but not necessarily that like it has to like be like so like wholeheartedly disproving that fact. But I think it needed a little bit more. Like the stakes didn't have to necessarily be like, is it true? Is it not true? But the stakes needed to be there in like having more validity for either side, because I don't think that really happens here, unfortunately. And I think you're right, Boozy, though. Like if there was more time spent with some of these other aspects of like and Mitch, you mentioned this too, with like the family, I think that would have been really more effective for when we do get those flashback parts, because for the most part, I think really the biggest flaw with this movie is just the structure. I think it's covering as much ground as it can with like a really interesting and dynamic story like this, but it's hard to really piece all that information together. And I think that was just the flaw here. That's the biggest flaw.
Right. But you can tell it has that power, and it also, when you look at kind of the story it's telling in terms of the rules that it gives with like, because obviously a lot of this is extended not from the direct story, but like the 3 o'clock thing, how they, the reference to that, which
I couldn't find anything. Sorry to cut you off here, but I couldn't find anything about that. I just know that that's like a horror movie staple.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like it comes from stuff like this because they explain it so well in this. Where you're like, it's a real thing
that between 3 and 4 is the witching hour. Like that's just a thing. But they definitely play on it so hard in this movie. But the thing is, I do think that while I think that's kind of silly, that's the kind of shit that kept me up at night, because like it's just the way that your brain works. Like when you're a kid and you're scared of that shit, I can't count how many times I've woken up at 3:15 and immediately thought of this movie. And because that happens a lot. Maybe I'm just infested with demons. Who knows?
Could be.
It would explain a lot.
I also want to say that, like, going back kind of that idea I had where it is kind of a best of clips when it comes to more of the direct horror stuff. I think the stuff in the barn is fantastic.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
When you have, I think that's probably the best shot in this film, aside from the fog shot, is when he's asking, you know, what the demons' names are, and then all the lights come out, and you just have the whites of her eyes. That sort of stuff, that's fantastic. And it is a shame that we didn't get more to invest in with these characters, because that, like, holy shit, talk about a good scene that's still scary and effective years later.
See, that's the issue, is because there are a lot of good things happening here, but since it's fairly confused in how it puts it together, it comes out a lot. Well, for me, it came out a lot more bland than it needed to be. If this film was maybe cut differently, I think it would have been a lot better film, if I'm being completely honest.
And also, I think that we needed to have more for Laura Linney to have happen, because, you know, like, did she not get the whole thing with her is that she has this guilt because she got some guy off for murder, and then he went and murdered somebody while this case was taking place. And they also mentioned that, like, the priest mentioned to her that she's gonna go to battle with, like, demon forces once she gets into the case. That was the part I laughed at.
What he said, I did too.
Is that this part you were talking about, Kyle, before? Because where he goes, Emily's story needs to be told.
Okay, that was just really cheesy, unfortunately. But no, I have to talk about this one thing. What the fuck was up with the weird skyscraper bar where all the villains hang out and have martinis together? They go to the same bar every 25 minutes, and they all have
Have you seen
it?
It's
it's always a martini too.
But like, that was just so fucking lame. I hated that so much. It was so stupid. It's funny though,
because you're fucking broke boys who are never going to be lawyers who can afford martinis every 20 minutes. You guys are just jealous, and you're projecting onto this masterpiece of a movie.
Yo, but if you're that rich, then maybe have some variety. Go to a couple different bars where you can get some different drinks. Like, I don't know.
Hey, don't fix what isn't broken.
I don't have a problem with that. I just have, it's so weird that if you're doing this case, I'm going to go back to my point here, that you're all of a sudden more inclined to demon things happening. Would that not translate to every single person then? Would, like, the judge not be dealing with this shit too?
I guess so. You're right.
Well, demons, they
only go after the prosecution or the defendants, right?
Right.
They're very picky and choosy.
Forgot about that demon fact. Yeah.
Also, shout out to this movie being filmed in Vancouver.
Hell yeah.
Back 2005. That was a good look back then. I guess they actually shot that.
Not anymore.
Well, back then there wasn't that many productions in Vancouver. Now there's a ton, so that's cool. They apparently filmed the skyscraper martini scene on the lower floor of the building, but painted the windows to look like a skyscraper. So that's respect.
That is respect.
But
do you guys want me to share some information about the real case?
I do, but I have one more thing, and then I'm done.
Okay.
I just want to mention that one scene that probably we wouldn't have brought up is when the priest is getting I guess attacked at night by the demon force. Holy hardcore Henry with the fucking camera on that.
Yeah.
It was so jarring because it never happened at any other point in this film, and then to all of a sudden go to this weird, like,
it was kind of cool.
It was really cool. It just it was so out of place in this, and it reminds like this is what hardcore Henry is, I'm assuming.
Oh, I got one more thing. I like the part where Jason is kind of talking to Laura Linney for, like, to give him, like, some insight into the relationship, and he's just basically spitting, like, Atreyu lyrics, like, so much of what we shared was a nightmare.
Yeah. It's true. Hey, it's
gloss and black.
It's a little corny, but the thing is, it's a horror movie, and that's why I think it's not overly successful in either venues, but I just really like it. I really like what it's
heavy-handed though. It's not all the time, but then sometimes it is like, there are demon forces among us. It's like, okay.
No, Emily's story must be told.
Exactly.
That's the only part I was like, ugh.
Which is too bad, because that kind of gives, like, a little bit less legitimacy to the priest, which we're kind of rooting for the priest.
You're supposed to be,
You're supposed to be, right?
But then I think it was like the year before or the year after where he was playing Falcone in Batman Begins, and it's like, fuck this guy. But he's a really good actor. I think he's good at just he's given some corny lines.
I also think Laura Linney is awesome. About the real case.
Okay.
Tell us all about it.
So all this information that I gathered was from the YouTube channel titled The Story Behind. And then you guys are going to laugh at this, but I also pulled from BuzzFeed's The Chilling Exorcism, which say what you want about BuzzFeed, but the journalists, they did their job in this, and they entertained skepticism on both sides. But I thought that if you can find that on YouTube, it's actually really interesting. It's 15 minutes long, and it's actually really funny. Like they start like mimicking like the real tapes and what you would have been saying at the time. But yeah, so it was Anneliese Michel was her name. She was born in 1952 in Klingenberg, Germany. Sorry, Andy, if I fucked up that place's name. But on September 1968, she was 16 years old when she experienced her first episode. But Anneliese Michel went through 67 exorcisms in 10 months. She had broken knees, fractured teeth, bruises, and wounds all over her body. She died of malnutrition and dehydration. She grew up in a religious family of Catholics who attended church twice a week. And when she was 16, she suddenly blacked out at school, and she began walking in a trance-like state. But she didn't remember what was happening to her. She claimed that she smelt burnt feces, and the family confirmed this. And that's one of my things. I was like,
wait,
they're on a fucking farm.
Also, how can they confirm it? That's what she smells. What the fuck is it? How are they going to...
Well, no, because they smelled the burnt feces as well. And like scent is a big thing about invoking and all like exorcisms.
Well, just the way it's worded, it makes it sound like they're being like, no, that's totally what she smells.
Checks out, yeah. Likely in this, I don't know. The same night, she felt a heavy feeling on her chest, and then she peed her bed. That's
being drunk. Like
exactly.
Every good alcoholic does this.
There's a lot that I have to say about this afterwards, but a year later, she experienced the same feeling and began having convulsions. She went to a neurologist who determined nothing was wrong with her brain. She later caught tuberculosis, and there she experienced her third episode. She then visited her neurologist again, who diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy. The disease causes seizures, memory loss, and hallucinations. She then began believing that she was possessed by the devil. Anneliese would lick her urine off the floor, she'd eat spiders and cockroaches, and ripped her clothes off. She would avoid religious items like crucifixes and holy water. Her family sought out multiple exorcists who advised them to continue medical treatment. That's very important, I think, is that the exorcists themselves and the Vatican and the people that they were talking to was saying that she needed to maintain medical treatment. Each exorcism, though, lasted several hours, and Anneliese, she would talk in distorted voices on behalf of 6 demons. She believed she was possessed by Lucifer, Judas, Nero, Cain, Hitler, and Fleischmann. I don't know who Fleischmann is, but so she threw in Hitler in there. And I guess could be a demon if you believe in that stuff. But she just named off all the evil names that she could think of, basically, is what I thought.
Yeah, she foretold of Cain from WWE. Weird.
Well, that's on the BuzzFeed article. The guy was talking, and he's just like, she's just running out of ideas of evil people, and then goes like, that blonde guy from Die Hard. But Anneliese didn't receive any medical attention, and she died in 1979 of malnutrition. She died at 23 years old, and she was 68 pounds. 2 priests and her parents were charged with negligent homicide. The priests were sentenced to 6 months in jail, though it was later suspended. Her parents received no punishment because they had, quote, had enough, which was a criterion in German law. They did extensive research to her brain after her death, and neurologists found no signs of any brain damage, even at a microscopic level. But what I have to say to that is keep in mind that it's 1968. Right, technologies and just medical practices have gone so far from then. But one of the main exorcists, Father Alt, he exhibited signs of schizophrenia. So that's another thing that could, be added to this little conglomerate of a messy situation that they have. But just, so that's pretty much what I have.
That's interesting. I guess with that being known, there's definitely more of a sort of clinical approach to everything that happened, right? This is more
you have to wonder if maybe she didn't want the holy water and the crosses, because if you have had 67 exorcisms, I'm assuming as soon as you start see them pulling that out of your kit, you're gonna be like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's a healthy reaction.
Also, as a woman who grew up going to church twice a week with her highly religious family, there's every possibility that all of these thoughts were put into her head and she's dealing with guilt. And that's like a thing that happens with a lot of exorcism cases, is that they're determined to be like suppressed guilt. And I think that there's a possibility for that happening. But the whole malnutrition thing and her losing all this weight, you know, could have to do with the fact that they were just like, she was eating spiders in her own urine.
Right.
But
not a balanced breakfast.
I don't know.
Not
know.
getting medical attention, not getting any medical attention where they just completely stopped.
Right.
And then you have these dipshits coming in who are, you know, it's just fairy dust to me. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't understand. I personally think that guy should have gotten a harsher sentence, or the parents at least should have gotten a harsher sentence, because at the end of the day, it's really their fault for getting these guys.
What did they claim? They've had enough, and you can just be like, yeah, I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, well, I don't know much about German law, but apparently back in the day that was a thing. But I think it also has to do with because like they had been dealing with this illness for so long that I think the court maybe just, you know, gave them a little bit of a break. They're like, hey, this has been enough, because they obviously went through the ringer. They went through some horrible things. But I don't know, I listened to all the tapes that everyone's so scared of and everything. I'm like, this is just a girl distorting her voice like any girl could if she's that fucking psychotic and, you know, mentally ill, and saying all these, like, she's giving reasons as to why she's in the situation that she's in, and I just don't buy it. But I don't believe in exorcisms at all. I don't believe in any of that shit.
I think, to be honest, in the case of like this film in particular, like it's just a more interesting screenplay to take the exorcism approach, right?
Yeah.
Like if you were to be more what you're describing, Mitch, like more to like, I guess what actually happened, then that is just generally speaking like somewhat less interesting. Like,
yeah, I don't want to watch somebody like drink piss and eat spiders for 2 hours in a minute.
Well, maybe not that it's less interesting, but it's more like, I mean, like that is messed up, but that could be interesting, I guess, in a sense, for a horror film. That could be. It could be. And so that kind of makes me disheartened a little bit, because I feel like they're really just sort of like bending this true story to fit like the narrative that they wanted for this film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
which is a little too bad. I mean, however, that probably happens 9 times out of 10 with a lot of true stories, like adaptations, right? Like,
yeah,
they're not always wholeheartedly from what happened. So I won't really knock the film too much for that. But that does give insight into this situation as a whole, because I mean, like, damn, this is a really interesting case at the very least, right? Like,
yeah. And this is like one of the few cases that people have been pulling from a long time. I'm not sure if either of you guys have seen it. I know our friends at Erie International did an episode on it a while ago, but Requiem. It's just called Requiem. No. And it's actually, I've heard that it's better, and it's the same story, but I've heard it's better, and it's treated with more of a straight face. I still haven't seen it, so I can't speak too much about it, but I don't know. I think out of Scott Derrickson's work too, I think this is his best horror movie. I'm not sure if you guys have seen Sinister, and I know a lot of people like it, but I think this is far better than Sinister.
Yeah, I'd say I tend to agree. I'm not a huge fan of Sinister.
I think I saw. Is that the one where like Ethan Hawke watches videotapes?
Yeah. And he walks around with with no lights on in the house for some reason, and just a little light.
We talked about this before. He's saving money.
Oh God.
I think I liked it a little bit. I don't really remember. I don't remember it very much.
The snuff tapes were cool. I remember the trailers being like amazing. You know,
with the lawnmower.
The lawnmower, man, and the family in the swimming pool. Like that's all wicked. But then it completely everything sucks the tension out when you see Mick Johnson from fucking Slipknot coming in and being Bagul. Really, it looks just like him, and constantly doing that whole jumping in front of the camera to scare you thing. I was very disappointed by that movie.
So there was something really funny that I found out about this film. Do you guys know the actor Dustin Milligan? Do you know who that is?
Doesn't ring a bell.
He's not super well known, but you might remember him as Marcus from Final Destination 3. If that rings any bells.
Oh, yes. Marcus from Final Destination 3, of course.
Anyways, this is a really funny thing I saw on the IMDb for this film. I just want to read it out. Dustin Milligan has described his audition for the role of Jason as his worst audition of his career. Milligan got so caught up in the scene that he knocked a hole in the wall with his elbow. He kept going, attempting to mask the hole by lingering in front of it, but the casting agents noticed immediately, and he was forced to pay for the repairs.
That's amazing.
Isn't that awesome?
The old classic lean in front of some shit to like...
Shout out Dustin Milligan. That's too funny. Poor guy.
No, and I don't know. I thought that like there's a lot to be said about Jennifer Carpenter here, and I think she did a really good job with what she was given. And I think people, like myself included, are a little hard on her just because she is so good at being irritating.
I didn't necessarily find her irritating. I
She's
guess.
not. Have you seen Dexter though?
I haven't seen her in Dexter. No, I've never watched.
There you go. Yeah, because that's where everyone.
I guess I didn't. Yeah, I don't find her irritating in this. If anything, like, and that's like I guess this is like a preference maybe, but I couldn't help but feel like sometimes she was like overperforming a little bit, like with this, But I mean, it's an exorcism, so
it's an exorcism movie, Kyle. Come on.
I don't know. I'm not gonna totally like. I didn't say I hated it, but like there were times where I was like, man, she is like generally shocking, and there's other times where it's like, oh, I don't know, like she's shrieking to like, just kind of like tell me that I should be scared right now, but I'm not really. I don't know. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I guess like all in all, like the film is not necessarily like faith based, but it does spends a lot of time like trying to say like God is stronger than medicine a lot of the time. And
yeah, that's an issue.
That's a little
right. We don't fuck with that.
I don't know. It's just like I think there's better ways to present that kind of thinking, not necessarily that like it's not relevant, because it's absolutely relevant in this film. It makes a lot of sense to an extent, but I just think it could have been handled a little bit better, and it took me out a little bit from those pretty much excellent courtroom scenes a lot of the time, actually. So I don't know. Pretty long but interesting movie.
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up here. And we'll get into talking about The Last Exorcism next week. But does anyone have any final thoughts?
No, I'm trying to think about, like, I feel like we've pretty much roasted the shit out of this movie. No, I'm just kidding. No, I got nothing.
Do you guys think that this film was trying to sort of like reboot The Exorcist in a way? Do you think that was its intentions a little bit?
Well, I think everyone who ever tackles an exorcism story is going to hope that it's going to do something and cash in off of that success.
I guess I only bring that up because I feel like it was kind of close to, right, to an extent, because I think this movie had a fuck ton of buzz. Like Mitch, you were just saying, you had a whole row of your friends watching a movie like this, which for most of the time is a courtroom drama.
Yeah, we were kind of 14 years old.
Exactly. It's kind of impressive in a way, right? But it also makes sense to me because I could absolutely see a bunch of 14-year-olds in a theater kind of just watching the courtroom stuff, some liking it, maybe some not, and just waiting for that next like shocking scene. Like that just makes sense, right? Like,
right.
And then getting progressively more interesting as the film goes on, which it definitely does, because by the time you get to that barn scene or the farm scene, whatever, like that's the most shocking, interesting part of the film in that regard. So it's interesting to me. Looking back, like 15 years later, I guess this is, or 16, fuck.
16.
Oh God, that's so depressing.
Looking back, I do actually think it's a pretty interesting, like when I think of like successful horror films or ones that were like really in like the public conscious at the time when they were being released, like this is kind of, like this is kind of a weird outlier in a sense, I think.
You heard it here first. Kyle says that this is a modern classic.
Kyle just said it's a modern classic. There we go. It doesn't matter
an outlier, modern classic.
Boys, keep in mind too, like that's another reason why I like it, is that around this era, like the time where these horror movies were coming out, like horror was in a really shitty spot for me. Like I did not like the J-horror remakes. Like even I wasn't a fan of The Ring when I first saw it, but I think it was because it scared me so bad actually. But I hated The Grudge, hated like Dark Water and all those, like those movies they were being pumped out every weekend. And then you have Exorcism of Emily Rose, which I just felt was a different player in the game.
Yeah, I totally. I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think it absolutely is. And I think I don't know. Like I said, like, yeah, it was a weird time. You had like things like House of Wax and The Grudge coming out with Exorcism of Emily Rose.
And Saw. Like and it's Saw and Hostel, all that shit was happening. That's
so weird because like I've talked about it so many times on the show how about that was like quote unquote like a shitty era for horror. But like if anything, it was a very interesting era for horror.
Yeah,
right?
it just wasn't my era. Like it
wasn't.
Like...
it's more of an accessible horror. It was a different style then. Yes,
definitely a different style, but like where credit is due, like that's a lot of variety to be completely fair.
Yeah. But then it eventually there was a couple years there where like because obviously Saw did a lot better than The Exorcism of Emily Rose. So like of course the box office is always going to tell you what you're going to see for the next 5 years.
We're only a year off from Stay Alive, so I mean, you know.
Oh boy, man, that is mind blowing that Stay Alive and this could even be remotely compared. How much of a better movie Exorcism of Emily Rose is? Jesus.
I could not disagree more. It's the 50th anniversary of Stay Alive. There's that.
All right, boys, let's wrap it up. So yeah, we'll see you guys next week, in which we're going to be talking about Kyle's pick, The Last Exorcism, and then the week after that, we're going to be talking about anything for Jackson. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Terror Table.
Take care.